downtown Vancouver. And if you're thinking of coming downtown or making it a special Valentine's Day, call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Make an evening of it in downtown Vancouver. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sassett and Switches, conducting things with intern Lachlan Irvin. We got a big show coming up. That's brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Mitsubishi in Richmond is home of the Mitsubishi Outlander. You can get that in a hybrid form, which I love because
you have.
I filled up for the first time in 2 months the other day. Really nice. Mitsubishi Outlander GT, though, as well, financed from 4.99%. Plus, you get the industry's best warranty, of course, at Mitsubishi. So check it out right now. Take it for a test drive at the Richmond Auto Mall. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today. We're asking you, is this year's edition of the Canucks better than the 2011 team? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube. Excuse me. More on that in a second, because they are outpacing that team that won the President's Trophy, the first of two, and made it to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. But they erase a 3-goal third period deficit, come back to beat the Columbus Blue Jackets 5-4 in overtime on Saturday. Brock Boeser with 3 goals, 4 points. He gets to that magic number 30. More on that coming up. Elias Pettersson with 2 goals, 3 points. Game-winning goal number 9. It's tied for the league lead with Sam Reinhart, West Vancouver's Sam Reinhart. JT Miller, he's off to the All-Star game with 3 assists. Quinn Hughes is off to the All-Star game with 3 assists. Pius Suter continues to work on that Miller-Boeser line with a pair of assists. And we're going to hit some. We're going to go through some of the milestones of these Vancouver Canucks here from Brock Boeser and Rick Tocchet in a second. But first, answer me the poll, because right now, Blake, the Vancouver Canucks 33-11-5. That's 724 hockey. The 2011 team 54-19-9. That's 713 hockey. 117 point pace.
Average team.
We're 117 point. The current edition is better than that pace, believe it or not. That 2011 team finished with a plus 77 goal differential, and this 2024 team is up to plus 59, although they're no longer the highest scoring team in the league. The Colorado Avalanche have usurped them just barely, 3.84 goals per game.
McKinnon scores 4 times per game, so that helps.
3.8.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go look at Nathan McKinnon's game log, folks, if you want to see just a Mona Lisa. The last 25 games of McKinnon's season is ridiculous. But back to the Canucks. The only difference I see in these two teams, and there's different, I think of teams often the way EA Sports sort of ranks things, offense, defense, and the bars are going to be at different spots in terms of ranking them. But overall, these two teams feel very similar in that them scoring seems inevitable, getting big saves seems inevitable, and winning seems inevitable, really, on a nightly basis. The biggest difference right now is that we saw it over 82 games for the 2011 team, and this has been a smaller sample size, to a useful sample size. I'm not diminishing that, but ultimately it is an 82-game season. Like that, it's a long grind, and being able to do it for 82 games is an achievement in and of itself, never mind the playoff success, which, of course, was just 1 win shy themselves. But the fact that we can actually have a reasonable conversation on that's it, is quite the hat tip for this team.
I voted no. I think the 2011 team was a little more complete, but it is absolutely extraordinary that we are having this discussion on January 29th after 49 Vancouver Canucks hockey games heading into their bye week and the All-Star break, leading the league.
I think this team might have a titch more offense, while the defense of that 2011 team was a titch more stout.
The other thing that's coming into focus here is the one thing we would say about that 2011 team is they didn't need to play 3 periods.
No.
Oftentimes they played 1 period and won. They were just that much better than most everyone they faced.
They usually scored first, but if they were down 1-0 going into the third period, no one was worried. You were pretty sure they were going to come away with a win.
Now, the Vancouver Canucks have not lost a game in regulation since January 4th, 2-1 in St. Louis. They've gone 11 straight here with points. But one thing that we have seen creep into their game a little bit is periods where it's just not happening.
Yeah.
Or even games where 2 periods where it's not necessarily happening. Now, they were very good in the early stages of this hockey game, but then they were down 4-1 after 2 periods, which brings us to Coach Tocchet. And what was his message after 40 minutes?
Just said we don't have to hit a home run every shift. I mean, when we got to 2-1, we're looking for home runs instead of just letting the game. That's probably, we're getting better at that. I will tell you that, but it's still something there. We got to be careful. You can't hit a home run. Sometimes you just got to let the play happen. And we learned, a valuable lesson with winning, which is great. And now, we got 71 points. The goal was to get 70 for the road trip. This homestand. So the guys did a hell of a job. And now this 10 days is a big thing for the guys.
5-game homestand, they get 9 of a possible 10 points. And how many times have we heard Rick Tocchet this year, Blake, say, well, we learned a lesson, but that's within a win, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I kept on thinking.
Because more often than not, you learn the lessons when you lose. And yet this team has been good enough and resourceful enough and resilient enough that they can have bad periods, like Tocchet talked about, trying to hit the home runs, everybody pressing a little too much, trying to get it all back in one shift. And yet, sure enough, they're able to channel and in the third period, get back even, force overtime, get the victory while learning the lesson along the way. It's a coach's dream.
The way I saw the game unfolding was in the first period after a not a great outing last time out, they responded to the coach and played well, but they were kind of a little forlorn that they didn't score a couple of goals in the period maybe. And, they were trying to finish up strong. Hey, it's a great first period. Nothing to show for it. Oh, man. And then they get a couple of bad breaks in the second period. They find themselves down 4-1. I thought, all right, whatever. 3-1-1 homestand, not the end of the world. They're I'm not surprised that they just ran on fumes into the All-Star break. Not surprised. I was ready to concede them and just say, you know what? I get it. I did not expect them to come back in the game. Not because they're not capable of it, just the circumstance. Last game before the All-Star break, such an unbelievable run of play lately. I thought, you know what? They're human beings. They're halfway.
They're in Florida already. They're in wherever.
And you know what? I was ready to forgive them for it.
Mm-hmm.
Human condition stuff.
Well, and I think that's what may be different about this Vancouver Canucks team is that there's a professionalism, a accountability, a responsibility that goes above and beyond. So yes, 33-11 and 5, the record for your Vancouver Canucks through the first part. The unofficial first half, of course, is well beyond the first half, but
that's the good news. It is well beyond the first half.
No, exactly. 33 left to play here. Okay, Brock Boeser, who, as we stated at the beginning of the season, I think if there's one story that all of Canuck Nation, Canucks Twitter, shows like this that cover the Vancouver Canucks could get behind, that would be a comeback season for Brock Boeser. With everything that he has gone through over the years, with his father, of course, being ill and ultimately passing away, with just, in some cases, hard luck injuries, like last year at training camp. You may remember this scrum early in the proceedings a year ago, September, when our Jeff Patterson was in conversation about Brock Boeser about season targets when it came to goals. Take a listen.
30 is always a number that's kind of been associated with you. Do you kind of feel like that's the target, and is this the year?
This is the year. That's all I got to say. This is the year.
It wasn't. This is the year. He was off.
Well, hours later, he got injured in a scrimmage and, alas, wasn't able to get to 30. In fact, only got to 18. 29 from his full rookie season, and even that was compromised with an injury over the final 20, remained the personal high for Brock Boeser until Saturday, where he completes the hat trick and gets to 30. He is tied now for 6th in the National Hockey League in goals. He had a bit of a slump there, had dipped down the rankings, but 30 goals has you tied for 6th. Here's Boeser on scoring 30.
Yeah, it means a lot. It's obviously something that I've wanted to get to for a while, so to get there is great, but obviously I couldn't have done it without my teammates and how we're playing and how we've created the standard.
And how big a milestone was it for Brock? Well, he acknowledged later when asked again that he's still processing all this.
I don't know if it's hit me yet, but I think more so just that we won that game. I think that that's really exciting for me right now, and just the fact that we came back from 4-1 and going to break with the high here.
I mean, he's in the end put together a very nice career. He's been very consistent in the goal scoring column.
Mm-hmm.
It was seemingly a matter of time. I don't think anybody would have predicted 30 goals in 49 games, though. Like, if we had told you at the outset, Brock Boeser will have a 32-goal season, I think people would have wrapped their heads around that.
Yep.
But you would have assumed that was in 77 games or something like that.
Although there was also a school of thought that the league was just passing him by. Because the sluggish feet were not going to allow him to keep up, get to those spots, and be that effective goal scorer we saw earlier in his career when the league, let's face it, was not quite as fast, was not quite as skilled as it is now. JT Miller leads the team in points heading into this All-Star game, 67. That is tied for 4th in the National Hockey League. Quinn Hughes leads all defensemen in points as well with 62. That's 4 better than Cale Makar. Quinn also with 50 assists. That's 3rd in the league behind only Kucherov and McKinnon, and they're just 3 ahead. And we know what kind of incredible years those two individuals are having. Hughes plus 34. That's best in the National Hockey League. His closest pursuer is his teammate, defense partner, Philip Hronek at plus 33. Thatcher Demko, 26 wins now. That is 2nd in the National. There are a few games left this week, but for the most part, these numbers are going to hold going into All-Star weekend in Toronto. Gorgiev with 27 wins is the leader there for goaltenders. Thatcher, a 920 save percentage. It's 5th amongst those with 20-plus games. 7th amongst those with 10-plus games is 244 goals against average, 10th in the league amongst those with 10 games. And, of course, 5 shutouts, which is tied for the league lead. So the Vancouver Canucks are peppering every statistical individual category, both team and the individual ones.
The pauses had me looking sort of at these paces of these great core players for the Canucks and what it means for their careers. JT Miller just passed the 600-point plateau in his career, and we know he's got the lifetime contract basically with the Canucks going forward. Is he a 1,000-point guy? Like, it sort of feels like it's probably doable for him to get to 1,000 points, isn't it? 400 points in the next 5 seasons, maybe something to that effect. Can you do it? I mean, count him out.
Certainly not. No, I know it's certainly not inevitable
because you're going to add what?
We'll see how he ages here.
Add 30 or 40 more points this season,
right?
So then he's really down to
340 points,
360 points over 4 seasons, 5 seasons.
I mean, I think the pace will tail off at some point in there. It's just a matter of whether the next couple of years.
If he can be at 95, if he can be at 95 for a couple more years, it chomps off what he has to do on the other side.
Turns 31 in March. So, yeah. And 2-3 more good years gets him in striking range, put it that way.
And then for Elias Pettersson, I mean, lo and behold, this is one of the most consistent goal scorers in the league now. And we don't think of him as a goal scorer. But he's got 27 and 49. 40's completely in the wheelhouse for Elias Pettersson after he had this huge month of January. And he's already had 4 seasons of at least 27 goals under his belt. He's coming off a back-to-back 30-goal season. So, he's at 163 goals in 374 games. It's a nice start to one's career. Never mind the point totals at 387, above a point per game for his career. So, I mean, these are prolific point getters over the last 3 seasons, not in terms of just the Canucks, but the league.
You're going to hear a whole lot going forward here, and I suspect over the All-Star game weekend in Toronto, about the trade deadline and players who are available. Now, we're going to get into a couple of players who are available in a moment. One of them, of course, is someone we know quite well here in Vancouver, and Chris Tanev. But Elliot Friedman talking about Andrei Kuzmenko to Chicago today.
Yeah. I mean, we spitballed that for the last few weeks just because they do need somebody. Jason Dickinson can.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why you're seeing these contract extensions in Chicago, Dickinson, Mrazek, Foligno, is they got to get to the salary floor next year.
And they do have to give Connor Bedard something to work with.
I too, of course, with Taylor Hall, he got hurt.
Like everybody got hurt that they tried to bring in, and Corey Perry had to be sent away. So that doesn't surprise me. And for Chicago's own sake, it's only 1 year left. So they get out from underneath it if it doesn't work out for them. If it does work out for them magnificently, when they want to be good in a couple of years' time, maybe they can re-sign him and keep him going.
Just help me out. Is there anyone on Chicago who the Canucks would fancy, or are we talking about just a straight salary dump here?
Yeah, maybe a pick.
I know at one point we were looking at the right shot defenseman there, Connor Murphy. He's hurt too, though, with a modified no trade. And that, of course, was at a time prior to the acquisition of Nikita Zadorov. So I'm not sure you're necessarily searching for that level, that salaried a defenseman anymore, particularly with finite cap space and the need for another top six forward. Frank Saravelli did a sensational piece looking at Chris Tanev as trade deadline candidate. It was very much in the same vein as the piece that he did on Sean Monahan last week that we went over, a deep dive looking at the player, looking at the interested parties, and then most importantly, and I think most interestingly, the trade history of profiles of defensemen that look like Chris Tanev. So first, just the review, and Frank talking, I'm sure, to scouts here. He still remains an elite shot blocker. He moves the puck quickly. This is not a guy who wants to spend too much time with the puck on his stick, so that still tracks. Very few turnovers from Chris Tanev. And, the knock on him is that he has not been available. The durability hasn't been there. He's played 93% of the games for the Calgary Flames. Now, the worry would be he misses the important ones, either down the stretch or in the Stanley Cup.
There's no forecasting
playoffs.
that. I mean,
it's hard to forecast that, although, with a guy who puts it on the line as often as Chris Tanev's done, I suppose you can forecast it a little more. He once was most expert in avoiding penalties, and not quite at that level. And Frank points out that, look, his jam isn't necessarily defending the rush as much as it is defending the half court. But a second or third pair somewhere in there, defenseman on a great team, he might just be a third pair at this point, a shutdown guy, a matchup guy. The teams that are interested, according to Frank: Dallas, Florida, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Toronto, Vancouver. I saw Elliott threw Ottawa in there on the weekend with the Senators, who have forever been searching for right shot defensemen and want to sell Tanev on being a veteran, defensive-minded guy for a good young team that has terrific left shot.
But that's a summertime pitch.
But that exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So of course Tanev is a rental. He's going into the summer as a UFA, and not the youngest guy anymore.
That's
either.
the thing. Like, what can you ask if you're the Flames? What can you ask for a 34-year-old with an injury reputation, even if it may not be fair?
Well, 2 years ago, Mark Giordano was 38. Right. Now, granted, Norris Trophy guy that Tanev has never reached.
That's right.
It was Mark Giordano with the Seattle Kraken retaining 50% of the salary, and Colin Blackwell, a utility forward, bottom six forward, went for 2 second-round picks and a third-round pick.
The retention's big, though.
Again, 2 years ago, Brett Kulak from Montreal to Edmonton, 50% retained for a second-round pick, a seventh-round pick, and a hope bet prospect. Again, 2 years ago, Josh Manson, 50% retained from Anaheim to Colorado for Drew Hellison, a B-level prospect, and a second-round pick. So there you go. Second-round pick plus, in some cases, plus.
That's with retention.
That's with 50% retention. Well, of course, the Canucks are going to need some retention, Blake.
Well, not if they trade Kuzmenko.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
But in a world where Chris Tanev's $4.5 million salary is coming on over without anything previously having gone out, then yes, you're going to need retention, or you're going to need to move back some salary. So there you go. It's a second-round pick, a second asset, and if that second asset is pretty far down the line, then maybe it's a third asset as well.
The tough part is, of course, that the Canucks don't have a second rounder this year. So is Calgary as interested in having to wait for a second-round pick the following year, or is that exactly the price that you get back from Chicago for Kuzmenko? Is it Kuzmenko for a second, and you immediately flip that second to the Calgary Flames as part of a Chris Tanev deal?
We have seen that once already.
Which, the Flames are going to ask the Canucks for the most because trading in division and helping them out, even though, again, it's a rental player, so it's unlikely to come back and haunt them. Maybe Tanev re-signs with the Canucks, but maybe not. Could see a variety of situations there. Tanev, of course, doesn't upset the apple cart, too. There's a lot of chemistry with, a handful of players still here from the Tanev years. So, as people try to, guard against breaking up the juggernaut Canucks here this season, I don't think Tanev's too big an incursion, albeit somebody on the blue line is upset about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, and of course, your captain has already gone to management saying, like this guy, he'd be a fit. And of course, once upon a time played alongside Chris Tanev.
One of Susi, Zadorov, or Cole is likely not super pleased
if they go down the Tanev route. And again, we perceive them to be hunting a top six forward first and foremost, but you got to be able to make that trade.
Mm-hmm.
And it is smokescreen season, of course.
But also, it's also not the end of the world in terms of a price tag. Like, it's not like you're packaging up a top prospect and a first round pick for Chris Tanev. Like,
no,
that's a doable trade.
Yep.
Like,
absolutely.
Like, my God, Jim Benning traded second round picks away. Like,
yep.
Like they were coupons for the grocery store.
Second and Bristevich. That's a little rich for my blood. I wouldn't go there for Tanev.
It's a little rich.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean,
second in EPD.
Yeah.
Second in Danila Klimovich.
Well,
maybe somebody
that
likes
one you do. That one you do for sure.
Second in Natu Ratu.
I think I do that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Elias Lindholm in Calgary, of course, one of the deadline prizes here as well. A top two centerman. There's not a lot of those. And someone who we also have heard the Vancouver Canucks are interested in, and he fits the bill as that top six forward. Athletic did a piece today where they look at Lindholm from the point of view of the Winnipeg Jets and what it would take the Jets to acquire this player. And we think he'll be amongst the most expensive players traded, certainly amongst the rental UFA to B players. Blake, they thought it might take Mason Appleton, who's turned into a middle six winger for the Jets, 23 points, 47 games, so right at a half point a game, playing 16 plus minutes a night, 28 years old. And Chaz Lucius, who's a first round pick, 18th overall from the 2021 draft, an American forward who was at the University of Minnesota, made his way to the Portland Winterhawks of the WHL, has also played in the AHL, has been hurt somewhat, but has 18 points in 29 career and AHL games as a guy who won't be 21 years old until May, a right shooter as well. So two pretty significant pieces there, if that's in the ballpark of what it's going to cost to land Elias Lindholm.
Yeah. I mean, again, we talked about the Tanev deal not being, I don't see the Tanev deal as expensive really at all based on some of the comparables, and given the age and all that, that's a bigger deal.
This one is more expensive.
That's
for
a
sure.
bigger deal. That one makes you gulp.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh yeah, and I'm not even sure what that deal is for the
Canucks side of things. Yeah,
like is that McCav and Lekramaki, something like that?
I think the only way you possibly go down that road if you're the Canucks is if you feel like there's any interest. He doesn't have to sign an extension yet, but is there interest in Lindholm as staying a Vancouver Canuck after the years through?
Because Appleton's a pretty cost-effective player too. He's under contract next year at $2.1 million, 2.16.
Yeah,
before hitting UFA status. So, just we're giving you some information there to ponder as you sit here between now and March 8th, going, where should the Canucks improve? What players can fit that bill, and what is it likely going to cost your team, the Canucks, to make those deals happen? Moving on to football.
Wow. Speaking of
We'll
comebacks,
shout out Cam and Chuck and Dennis and everyone at the Pemby. We had a great time yesterday watching both games. I want to let's start with the AFC game for a moment before we get into Dan Campbell and fourth down. An incredible graphic yesterday from Adam Schefter and the ESPN team. Mahomes is 72-22 in the regular season in his first 6 years. Tom Brady was 2 games worse than that, 70-24. Mahomes is 14-3 in the playoffs. Brady is 12-2. Of course, we've expanded the playoffs a little. 4 AFC titles for Mahomes, 3 for Tom Brady. 3 Super Bowl rings for Brady, 2 for Mahomes. Of course, he'll have a chance to win a third. Touchdown to interception ratio is, in fact, not close. Mahomes with 90 more touchdowns than Brady through the air. Remember, when Tom first came on the scene, he wasn't exactly a throw the ball all over the yard, big numbers type of guy. And the quarterback rating also in Patrick Mahomes' favor. Like, is it possible, Blake, that we're seeing one GOAT, like when Brady got to 6 championships and then to 7 in Tampa Bay? I forget about, close the book. That's that.
Yeah, this is Novak Djokovic.
Yeah.
Just being like,
just
really,
saying, okay, Federer, Nadal, here I am.
Do you like those records, Roger? You've got them for a year. And then I'm going to erase all of them. Now, the biggest difference, honestly, I think Mahomes may have raised the floor. His floors might be above Brady's floor, of sort of like,
Well, I think he's got more natural talent than Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Did.
But
does he have the will to win? Does he have the will to do it for as long as Tom did?
And you need the help of an organization too.
Right. Well, he's got a good one.
He's got a good one. And they've been great. But should he have one more ring than he has? Based on all that playoff success?
I mean, of course, the one he lost was to Tom Brady.
Yeah. So, like, he's got a lot of work to do to fill up those fingers.
No question. But it's just astounding.
It is.
That
it's crazy.
Your first 6 years as a starting quarterback, you're sitting right there, if not leading the GOAT in certain metrics. And of course, with a chance to tie him in the most important category of them all, Super Bowl rings, championships. Kansas City runs the ball 32 times to Baltimore 16. And there were only 3 early down runs from Ravens running backs in this game.
What were they thinking?
That's astonishing.
What were they thinking?
Like, you cannot get outrushed if you're the Baltimore Ravens in this game. Kansas City throws 2 more passes, so they ran 18 more plays than Baltimore did. And, of course, they weren't besieged by dumb penalties like the Ravens committed. 8 for 95 as opposed to 3 for 30, and so many of those 15-yard penalties and needless penalties, like Zay Flowers, who has him a really difficult game. The 2 fumbles are huge here. The third down conversion, Baltimore 3 of 11, Kansas City 8 of 18, and Lamar 20 of 37. And if you had doubts, and I had some going into the game, that Lamar Jackson had completely fixed himself in terms of being a guy who could sit in the pocket, throw it to the proper guy accurately downfield, well, those doubts were proven true. That interception into triple coverage in the end zone, I just have zero explanation for. If you're trying to win Super Bowls and beat guys like Patrick Mahomes, you can't come close to making a throw like that.
Also, like, use your legs. If there's
Well, he
good
did
coverage.
early. I mean, they were threatening him early.
And he had 54 yards on 8 carries as it is. Like, if there's no options, use the legs.
Did he beat your prop over on the rushing?
Yeah.
What was it again?
Was it 59 or 39? I think it might have been 39.
Okay, we'll have to look at that for easiness on Tuesday's program.
The other thing proven was that Travis Kelce's distracted. Big day for him. He's the one guy who had a big day receiving. 11 targets, 11 catches, 116 yards, and the touchdown.
Yeah.
That was small ball by the Chiefs by their own metrics.
Right.
And they still made it work.
One of the worries I had about Baltimore going into this game is if you're going to play zone defense against that level of quarterback, Mahomes, then you need to be able to do one of two things. Either disguise the coverages enough so you can confuse them, perhaps get some turnovers, or at the very least get some ineffective plays, or pressure him and get him to the point where his timing is off, where he doesn't have the ability to sit there and read where the ball needs to go. Those things didn't happen.
Yeah.
For the Ravens.
And credit to the Chiefs defense too. We talk about Mahomes and Kelce and all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Chiefs defense too.
I think if you're Baltimore though, and absolutely, Kansas City deserves a lion's share of credit, but take a look at what you were facing here. If you were Baltimore, the Kansas City offensive tackles have been weak spots for a while. They're all pro guard. Joe Thuney wasn't able to go, pectoral injury. Their linebacker spy, Willie Gay, the guy who was supposed to spy Lamar Jackson, was hurt and didn't play in this football game. Baltimore had virtually every consequential piece healthy, including the tight end Mark Andrews, and it still wasn't enough. And, just talking with people yesterday as we were taking all this in, look at how much a great quarterback now covers up in the NFL. Remember when we'd look at the teams that Brady would roll into Super Bowl with and go, I don't know, they got some protection issues. They're not that great in coverage. Receivers don't really scare you. Didn't matter. Quarterback was so good. And that would be actually my one worry for the NFL going forward, that if the quarterback's weight got even more pronounced in terms of winning, that if you could no longer win a Super Bowl with great defense and a running game and a B-level quarterback. I do wonder, are we getting to a point where it's Champions League? Where it's Premier League, where there's 5 or 6 teams at the top who got a chance to win. And in the NFL's case, because you have the great quarterback. And if you don't, you're playing for something short.
Well, does having fewer great quarterbacks make that less likely or more likely? Because there's fewer great quarterbacks now.
Oh, unquestionably.
So,
and again, there's been a drain on incredible careers and talents at this position here that we've sat down and watched over the last 2+ decades, in the case of your Bradys, your Mannings, your Breezes, Roethlisberger's, all credentialed guys who have left the league over the last half decade.
Well, on that note, let's go to 2, I think, flawed quarterbacks in Goff and Purdy.
Yep.
And I don't know. Are you fixated on the call? Because I am not.
So,
I kick a field goal too.
I understand Dan Campbell and aggressiveness and identity. I also understand that the analytics would tell you in a benign environment, you go for that 4th down instead of kicking the field goal. I would like to know what the analytics say about forging a 17-point lead for a second time.
Right.
I would suspect there are very few teams in the annals that have faced a 17-point deficit coming out of halftime, cut into that deficit, then face that deficit or greater again and come back and won it a second time. There were some terrific writing. First of all, it's only the 4th time in the history of the National Football League playoffs where a team that has trailed by 17 points at halftime goes on to win the game. The Patriots beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl, of course, 28-3. You got to go back to that incredible 93 Forget divisional or wild card game where the Bills erased a 35-3 deficit and came back and beat Warren Moon and the Houston Oilers. And there was a game in the 50s, believe it or not, with the 49ers and the Lions, were a 17-point game at the half.
If it's a tie game, you absolutely go for it. You got nothing to lose. It's a tie game, or it's not, or you have a lead going into the half. There's no doubt about it. If it's a tie game, you go for it on fourth down. But your field goal still makes it a 3-possession game.
Well, and that's huge.
And so you're thinking,
it's a 45-yard field goal. You got a pretty good chance of making that. You're 75% and above on that kick. And then you turn it into a situation where San Francisco needs to score 3 more times with about 22 minutes or so to play.
If you feel like you're a good team at all, you think you can hold on to a 17-point lead through half a football game.
Dan Campbell, I don't regret those decisions, and that's hard. It's hard because we didn't come through. It wasn't able to work out, but I don't. And I understand the scrutiny, meaning regrets. I'll get. I understand the scrutiny. I'll get. That's part of the gig, man. A very mature way to handle it. If you're Dan Campbell, Mike Florio and Pro Football Talk, and I loved this, Blake. Coaches should be strategic, not aggressive. He talked about how analytics and aggressive are now being used synonymously, and that's not the case.
No.
Sometimes sound strategy considerations point to being willfully aggressive. Sometimes they point to being deliberately passive. And he makes the point that when you go up 3 scores at that stage in the game, you're probably going to one-dimensionalize the San Francisco 49ers. They're not going to be able to rely on the running game as often, not to mention the fact that you put the fear of God in them. There's an anxiety at that point, knowing they pretty much have to be perfect the rest of the way. So, look, I will put this in your pipe over the next 2 weeks. Super Bowl 54, featuring these exact 2 teams. The 49ers effectively had the game won until a quarterback we didn't really think was championship worthy, Jimmy Garoppolo, started turning the football over, and Kansas City won 31-20. Blake, it's hilarious because 2008 or 2007, the New England Patriots, the undefeated season, they go into that Super Bowl against the long shot New York Giants. They get upset. The undefeated season is no more. And then 4 years later, they lose, I don't say a carbon copy game, but a very similar game to the New York Giants, where they can't solve the defensive front that the Giants threw at them and lose a second Super Bowl to a common opponent. I sort of had a flash of that this morning. Is San Francisco going to go in this game and lose it again because the quarterback can't keep up and make enough plays and makes too many mistakes? Different teams. We'll see how this goes. But as I sit here right now and I eye it up, boy, how do you pick against Patrick Mahomes in this game after whom he has beat over the last couple
If you're not
weeks?
getting points, if you're just trying to pick the winner, I don't know how you don't pick the Chiefs. I mean, I don't know how.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into our schedule this week. With the Vancouver Canucks off, we're taking a few days off as well. Tuesday through Thursday we'll be off. We'll be back on Friday to talk about everything All-Star game.
If there's breaking news,
if there is breaking
we'll
news, of course. If the Canucks swing a trade, we will be at it with an emergency program. Let's get to today's menu. It's going to feature Frank Corrado, who's going to join us. Plenty to talk about with Frank. We'll get to some hashtags, the best and worst of Twitter, JPAT, and some Whitecaps news on the pod side, all coming up. Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian-owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
Hey, gang, if you're finding yourself a little directionless without purpose on a game night, may I recommend Greta. It's a great spot to catch the game throughout the season. They're at 50 West Cordova, so you're on foot. You're just walking to and from the game. It's a lot of fun. It's a go-to spot for food, drink specials, and fun before and after the game. They do have specials every day. They've got all-day happy hour on Wednesdays, and they've got all those arcade games to keep you busy as well. So make it a fun game night at 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar and Grill. Visit them at gretabar.com.
With TSN hockey analyst and former Vancouver Canuck Frank Corrado. And Frank, as we head into All-Star Week, I'm here to tell you your Vancouver Canucks are first in the National Hockey League with 71 points. Their points percentage, of course, also now tops in the National Hockey League, tied with Boston. Their goal differential has been best since the jump. That blowout win against Edmonton, plus 59, 14 better than the next best club. I'm just shaking my head in disbelief at what this Canucks team has done this year. Like
how they've done it.
And how they've done it. When I hit you with all of that, what comes to mind?
I had the question posed to me today. What's the best Canadian team story in the NHL? And it's obviously the Vancouver Canucks. But it's the best story in the NHL, not just the Canadian teams. It is the best story. I think coming into the season, if everything were to go well for the Canucks, given the division they're in, having to go up against Vegas, LA, Edmonton, and the dysfunction that has followed this team around for the last, the better part of a decade. If everything were to go well and they were here sitting in a wild card position, I think a lot of fans and the team would be thrilled at that. But for them to not only be ahead of that, but to be 7 points ahead of the Stanley Cup defending Vegas Golden Knights heading into the All-Star break is super impressive. It's just, and you're right, the way they've done it hasn't been just one thing. Like, if you go deeper, the Canucks are the best stories, but the stories within the Canucks is really, really incredible. Like, Quinn Hughes pushing up on Cale Makar for the best defenseman in the NHL this year. Like, Cale Makar was in a category of his own. And a lot of people will probably still tell you they'll take Cale Makar, but Quinn Hughes is right there, nipping at his heels. And then take it up front. Like JT Miller, his ability to kind of relish this defensive role and take that on and show a little more away from the puck. Pettersson going back, trying to go back-to-back 100-point seasons and probably will be able to do it. Brock Boeser with his big bounce-back year. By the way, I was thinking about this watching the game Saturday. Did we not have a talk? It was over the summer or it was last year where we were talking about Boeser, and I don't want to pump my own tires. I don't like doing that, but I'm gonna. I said that would be my candidate to have a big bounce back year this year. And he did, but that's more on him, not my evaluation skills. Anyways, and Thatcher Demko. Like Thatcher Demko early in the season, like he kind of had to weather a lot of games where there was a lot of grade A scoring chances before they were really able to shore things up defensively. So there's so many amazing storylines within the group, and that's led to the group being the best story in the NHL.
Is chemistry a real thing? And the reason I'm asking about chemistry is we know all these players. Like the core has played together before for a few years, in fact. Everybody knows who Teddy Bluger is. He's not a new player in the league. Sam Lafferty's a known quantity. Like all these players have histories. There's a few young bucks that are developing, like Nils Höglander would be put into that group. Even Pius Suter. We know who Pius Suter is. Why is it working? Is that just team chemistry? Is it team health? To what do we attribute the fact that this Canucks team can be a 70-point team, 80-point team one year, and be 100 and maybe 110-point team the next?
The health thing is so underrated, but so important. Your team is so different if you don't have the health of a couple individuals that really help kind of propel your team. And like sometimes we try and over evaluate and analyze things. And the fact of the matter is some guys just aren't available. And some guys are available, but they're banged up and they're hurt and they're not playing to their 100% capability. So that's a massive thing. That's huge in the NHL. But the other thing about chemistry, as a player, I always felt like there were certain players that you felt more comfortable on the ice with on any given time. And yes, a lot of times it's like, hey, if I was, if I was ever playing with Dan Hamhuis or Alex Edler, I was like, awesome. Like they're great players. But there's just something to be said about the kind of instincts that go with playing with some players over the other. And sometimes it just clicks. It feels like, you guys read off each other a little better. The communication seems like it's a little more free flowing. You don't feel like there's any kind of roadblocks as far as how you communicate and how you do things together on the ice. When you have that, it's like lightning in a bottle, man. You feel like, okay, I don't want to see anyone else. Like we're doing our job. Everyone else has to find this and we'll be in a good place. So there's something to be said for that. But when we evaluate, like I find when we evaluate, if we just say so-and-so has good chemistry together, I don't think we're getting the full picture. Like, what is that chemistry? Like, what's making that happen? So, in the case of the Canucks, like, I don't know, the third line, like they're tenacious, they're physical, they're not afraid to make a play. Like, those are the things that are leading to us seeing that chemistry on full display. And even the Hughes and Hronek pair, like their ability to really push the puck up the ice. They don't spend that much time in their own zone. What they do on the blue line in the offensive zone, the way they read off each other, like those are the things that lead to us seeing the chemistry. And I think there's a lot of like a big portion of this group that has found that. There are a few players that haven't, right? Like Kuzmenko still hasn't found his groove yet. But when it's only a small portion that hasn't found that chemistry, chances are your team's playing pretty well.
Poll question today. Is this year's edition better than the 2010-2011 team, which won the President's Trophy?
No. I love that
Not there
team.
Yet, huh?
I'm not there. Like, I loved that team. I thought that team had, like, they have that magic kind of pixie dust. And not that this team doesn't, because they're just, they're humming along doing their thing. But there was just something about the way that team played and the way they were built. They were so like forward thinking at the time compared to what the league was doing and trying to play. And I'm not there that this team is better than that team yet.
That team played at a 7:13 pace. This one's at a 7:24 pace. So it is on pace. To exceed 117 points. We shall see where it goes.
I was always surprised when that team lost.
Yeah, well,
like it always.
No, but here's Frank. We've been talking about this a little more readily here because that team could play one period and win a hockey game. And as much as Rick Tocchet might be loath to hear this, we're now starting to see a Canucks team that can play a period and win a hockey game, which I know is a little bit scary. No, I know it isn't. It's not a great habit, but it's also a symbol of excellence, right? When you don't need to play a full 60 minutes.
If it's loss mitigation, like in the case of the Columbus Blue Jackets, if it's holy crap, this was headed for a loss and we pulled this one out of the loss pile and put it in the win, then it's a good thing. You just don't want it to be the backbone of your team, I guess.
It's something that's hard to quantify, but teams that just find a way to win, it's like just good teams just find a way. And there's always this factor where you're playing against certain teams that really have that going on, and either you go into their building or they come into your building and you're like, man, we outplayed them, we outchanced them, we outshot them, and they still found a way to win the game. Like, good teams just find a way to do that. And you go back, look at the list of Stanley Cup champions over the years. I feel like Tampa was always doing that to teams. I saw it all the time here when they would play the Leafs, where Leafs are playing great. All of a sudden, Tampa gets a couple power play opportunities, and bang, bang, it's like game over. See you later. Or they had their one chance, and it was they made the most of it. Like, the Canucks have that, and one of the best attributes you could say about a team is that they could win so many different types of games, styles of games. Like, I see that right now with the Florida Panthers in the East. Like, Florida you talk about, and I can't remember where I said this, but you talk about versatile players all the time and how effective they are, right? They are a versatile team. And I think the Canucks have shades of that as well, where, they could be down in the game, they could have the big comeback and win the game. they could dominate the game from start to finish, although they haven't been great in the second period lately, although they get off to great starts in the first period, and you think that's going to be the case. They can win tight games. They can win that free-flowing kind of track meet game, which is not recommended more than you have to. But that's the indication of a team that has that factor where it's like they just know how to win hockey games, and like you don't get to be the best team in the NHL in the standings if you don't have that.
You mentioned all the stories within the story that is the Vancouver Canucks. Is Boeser the best? And not just because you called it as a comeback, but just because so many people can get behind it.
It's the best story for sure. And you just think about everything that the guy's been through. And, the fact that if the team could have found I don't know for certain, but it seems like if the team could have found a way to move on at certain points, they likely would have.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to still be here, 30 goals by the All-Star break, like already, he set a career high, and it looks different for him. Like the goal he scores in the second period, we've talked about this a lot on Saturday with Boeser, where, you see those first 3 strides where he beats the defenseman to the back post there. Like that's been a little bit of a difference maker for Boeser. And he's obviously put in the work to achieve that and get there. So it's such a great story because, you knew the skill set was there. You knew the ability was there. Hockey and sports in general, it's such a mental thing. And there can be so many struggles that can weigh you down. And, I think we also need to remember there's a human element to a lot of this stuff. And for him to have the success he's having this year just goes to show you that when you have a clear head and you're in a good space, you have the skill, you have the ability, you put it all together. And like, we kind of knew what the other guys were, right? Like, as much as Hughes pushing up on Makar is a great story, Pettersson potentially going back-to-back 100-point seasons, Demko's always been great. Like, those are all great stories, but this is the one that goes from, rock bottom to the penthouse the quickest, and it's really cool to see.
The crowd helped. They get a second assist on the win. Do you remember that feeling? Do you remember that feeling of a crowd building you up and putting air under the wings? Because I don't think it's any question that really helped the Canucks on Saturday night.
The biggest place I remember that is actually in Utica when we were going to the finals, the Calder Cup finals. That crowd was crazy. Like, I heard a story, and I didn't see this with my own eyes, but I heard a story, and it was written somewhere, that there was a gentleman in the crowd with a prosthetic leg, and anytime we scored a goal, he would pour his beer into the prosthetic and chug the beer. Oh. And like that's how crazy this crowd was. And you could really get there were times where we were maybe a little sleepy, and we were a really good team that year, but some nights you just don't have it. That crowd, they would initiate a lot of the energy in the building, and you could really get behind it. I always loved the crowds in Vancouver. Like, I always thought they were great. Like, someone would have a really good penalty kill, go down there, chew up, 10, 15 seconds, put some pressure on the D, and everyone's clapping. People are like cheering on not every building in the NHL does that. And the game operations do a great job of like cueing the fans. That's one thing I noticed when I came to watch the game against the Stars earlier in the season on a Saturday night. Like, the game ops do a good job of, they'll flash like "Go Canucks, go," and then everyone's going. Like, everyone's very attentive to it, which is great. But one of my favorite moments with the crowd in Vancouver, and I'll never forget this feeling as long as I live, is coming out for Game 1 of the playoffs. And I had literally, like, 2 years before, watched the Canucks playoff run from start to finish, and was like so like mesmerized by it. It was so cool. And then to walk out onto the ice with the lights going and the towels waving and the fans going nuts to Where the Streets Have No Name is like top 3 hockey moments, most surreal things I've ever experienced. And when the Canucks are in the playoffs this year, Where the Streets Have No Name has to be coming back.
I sure hope so. Yeah.
Has to. Yeah.
All-Star weekend, All-Star game. Have you ever heard of a guy getting confidence from being in that select group and getting to participate, or is it more nuisance than confidence builder?
No, I've never heard anyone saying that's a confidence builder. And I don't know if it's a nuisance for everyone. Like I think
No.
It's a nice feather.
First time guys for sure.
Yeah,
soak it all in, right?
It's a great, like, listen, at the end of the day, it's a great honor to be considered an all-star in the NHL. And that's something you're always going to have attached to your name. So I think that's really cool. And like they do a great job of making sure that everyone gets to enjoy the weekend, not only for themselves, but whoever they bring, whether it's the wife, girlfriend, family, all that kind of stuff. So, that part's really cool. It'll be interesting though with the All-Star game this year. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but do you care that the player in the skills competition is going to win $1 million? Like, I don't really care. Like, these guys all make a lot of money anyways. Maybe I kind of think the players who are participating in the skills competition might be more inclined to just not be the guy who finishes last. So that's why they'll try a little bit more, because you don't want to be the last place finisher on that.
Are we worried about last picks and feelings during the draft part here, or does the presence of the celebrity sort of smooth that one over?
I don't know. Someone's got to get picked last. Like, it's just, it's the nature of it. It's the All-Star game. These guys are all, some of the best players in the league, although there's some notable omissions because you have to have a player from every single team. But like, I think it's up to the way they do it. That would deter the whole, hey, we're laughing at the guy who got picked last. The guy's at the All-Star game. Like, I don't know. Someone's going to have to get picked last. As long as they don't make it like this whole running joke and bit and gag thing, it's whatever you make of the situation.
Right. I vote for Ketzel.
Fewest cringes per 60 is going to win it for me.
Like, seriously, though. Like, there's a lot of things that the league does, and you watch it, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's like I'm watching an early episode of The Office.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I don't want to look, like, I have to look away, but I don't want to. It's cringe. It's awkward. Or I don't know, take your pick. King of Queens, early episode of The Office. Like, that's the feeling I get sometimes.
Last question for you, because our buddy Frank Saravelli has done a big deep dive into Chris Tanev and his trade value and his game and all of that. How, if you're the Canucks, would you be interested, and how confident would you be that Tanev can be healthy through the rest of this season and through a postseason? I
would be very interested, because, like, we just kind of talked about, the Canucks have caught this lightning in a bottle. So why not really go for it, right? In a sense that you bring in a piece that really helps you. And what did Frank say was the cost? Like, what was his feelings on that?
Well, there were four actually different defense trades mentioned. In some cases, you got to go back to 2016, where Chris Russell went to Calgary for a conditional second and a couple of B to C level prospects. Brent Kulak went to Edmonton a couple years ago from Montreal for a second round pick, a seventh, and a hope bet prospect. And then there was Josh Manson to Colorado from Anaheim, Drew Hellison, who was probably a B level prospect and a second round pick. And then the last one was Giordano to Toronto with Blackwell for 2 second round picks and a third. So that gives you sort of a range.
Okay. So I went on Jay Onright's show a little while back. This was right after the Zadorov trade. And we were talking about, like, if Toronto wanted to bring in Chris Tanev, like, what's that going to cost? And we went through the whole thing, kind of based on if the Leafs were trying to do it, because they were the team at the time that was, everyone was connecting. They need the defensive help. And some moron got my email address. Some idiot in Calgary got my email address and said, you don't know what you're talking about, because, Chris Tanev, I can't remember what we said it was going to cost. It was going to be like a pick or 2 picks. It was going to be 2 picks, basically. I think that's what we said at the time. And it's like, how dare you insinuate it's not going to be a first-round pick and it's got to be a high-end prospect? I'm like, he's a really good player. He's going to help a team. He's, like, also 34, and he carries a larger cap hit. So there's that. as well. And I saw on the weekend, it was reported that Ottawa potentially has some interest in Chris Tanev, and that would be more of a longer term thing. But you think about putting Chris Tanev into Vancouver, where, okay, he might not even have to play on the first pair, but he could if you wanted him to. He doesn't have to play a ridiculous amount of minutes because there's more good players on the back end than when he was here. So when it comes to that injury risk, those two things help mitigate that. So there's a better chance that you're putting him in a position to stay healthy, but B, a position where you get into the playoffs and you didn't have to run, 34-year-old Chris Tanev, who's a really good player. He's in really good shape, all that kind of stuff. But, he's been injured. You don't have to run him into the ground, and you get the best out of him at the right time. So it makes sense on a lot of levels. Sorry, I was so pissed when I'm like, how did this moron get my email address in Calgary? But yeah, there we go.
You survived. It's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
My dude, thank you for this on a Monday, no less. We will catch up next week. Enjoy All-Star festivities. Until
I will
then.
be staying far away. I don't need the traffic. I don't want to pay for parking. I don't want the crowds. I will be tucked away at home. Thank you, though. Watching from afar.
80-year-old Frank Corrado here with Sekeres Price.
Stay away from the morons.
That's right.
Yeah.
Enjoy
And
with
stay
your
away
popcorn
from the morons.
at your home. That's right.
It's happy hour on Sekeres and Price. Today's beer of the day from Yellow Dog, the High Five Hazy IPA.
My family's very own whiskey, barrel-aged and set apart, marked with VO, artfully blended, impeccably crafted, as a wedding gift to my son, for the bride and groom. And now, over a century later, from our very own family to yours, a legacy rooted in whiskey. Seagram's VO, growing deeper, reaching out, raising a glass to your legacy. Seagram's VO, make it your very own.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.